Hey guys, and welcome back. So, coming back to you from my own personal build, today we're actually going to be talking about unconditioned and conditioned spaces and how to design and build them. So, first thing you want to do is actually subscribe to my channel so you can learn more about all this content. It's 100% Rockwool all the time. So, other building science knowledge as well. So, one thing I wanted to bring up today was unconditioned versus conditioned spaces. So, I'm standing actually right now in my 3-season room. So, one thing to note is actually this wall that you can see right behind me. That's actually conditioned space. So my building envelope actually comes right down this wall. So I have all my control layers right there. This is going to be a 3-season room. So meaning we're going to actually be heating this, but I want the conditioned spaces, even though this won't always be conditioned, I'm treating it as a unconditioned space. So we could still go ahead and insulate in these walls, in the ceiling, but this is going to be its own conditioned space. We're going to have a little uh, not wood fireplace, natural gas fireplace right in the corner here. So that's really going to be the primary heating source. But again, I don't need these two areas to mix. So one important thing to note when you're building an additional unconditioned space that's literally attached to your conditioned space is basically you want to build the building envelope first. So one thing to note is actually up at the top there. That's actually secured through 2 inches of comfort board. So long lag screws going right into the meat of the structure of the initial one. Uh, Everything else is self-supporting. So you do want to make sure that you're running all of this design through an engineer, a structural engineer, to make sure that you still have the proper loading. Another option there is actually taking blocks of wood and actually putting them behind just certain sections if you are concerned about wood to wood contact. And then you still will have smaller thermal bridges, but still it's pretty negligible in the whole grand scheme of things. So as we continue to talk about conditioned and unconditioned spaces, I wanted to bring up this overhang and basically this entire 3-season room that we built. So we actually did the building envelope first, like I alluded to earlier. But one thing that we did was we actually bolted all these overhangs on after the fact. So my control layers are all continuous. There's not one break, there's no thermal bridging in the thermal control layer. So it's much actually easier to then detail, and we're not stuffing this thing with insulation just in the webbings of the frame. So this was something that we've actually changed since the beginning design of the house with the front porch. And I'll show a little picture of how we did that, but that was really just wood to wood contact. Whereas now, I'm very comfortable with this kind of approach. Plus, it's a very small overhang, so there's not a lot of weight. Again, you always want to get a structural engineer involved when you start designing these. We have all the densities and everything available to you at www.rockwool.com. So as we continue to talk about a little bit more about conditioned versus unconditioned spaces, you can see this is actually where the conditioned space ends and the unconditioned space begins. So you'll notice this corner, and a couple videos back, you could actually see why we did this corner this way. But this is basically just, it dives right in to this. You have a solid structure to screw into along with Comfort Board 80. So this is one of the sheets that we have. It's actually quite a nice product. It does have some weight to it. This is an R8.4, so this is our 2-inch Comfort Board 80. You can see we temporarily fastened it just in a couple areas here until we got the furring strips up. The furring strips ultimately are going to be what actually secures the Comfort Board to the wall. You're also reducing air penetrations by only using these instead of having a lot of fasteners and then a lot more fasteners going through your house wrap. So one thing I wanted to address here was actually the top of window. One thing that you're going to notice here is that there's about 8 inches above it that's just completely missing with Comfort Board. We are going to be filling those in with Comfort Board, but we need a simple flashing. So basically a Z bend flash that's going to go all the way back to the house wrap and all the way out and kick out in front of the window or on both sides. So that's going to go around the trim board and everything else. So that's something that, the trades aren't really working together. They don't want to both be here at the same time. So the siding contractor is typically going to be doing your flashings, whereas the framing contractor, in my case, did all the comfort board 80. So they just did that. The siding contractors can then just piece in the smaller pieces of comfort board, always have some scrap on hand available. Typically, you have those pieces anyway. So that's just a little pro tip there. One of the reasons why we are doing the flashing here is I have 2 stories high. So the bottom windows always get more water when the roof line is way up high. Now, one thing to note, my overhang is very wide. You always want to make sure where your drip edges and your plantings are because they're not going to get water. So same thing as your house is not going to get a lot of water, so are those plants. So on another note, with unconditioned and conditioned spaces, you'll notice that I'm actually showing you the very top of the house and there's comfort board on it, and my insulation is basically right around that layer. So technically all that insulation really is not doing anything because my attic is unconditioned space. However, for the siding contractor to come back and instead of framing it with more lumber, I figured might as well just run the comfort board all the way up to the eave. And that's our simple design for unconditioned and conditioned spaces. However, again, that's going to be unconditioned right there and conditioned right here. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Definitely subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dan Edelman RW, and you'll see a lot more frequent content. But of course, YouTube, subscribe to my channel. Until next time, rock on.
I can't do nothing with you.